Welcome to Fun with Annuities, where every single week I welcome a celebrity guest expert that can help you maximize Chapter 2 of your life. Listen, learn, laugh, and love every minute of the most unique financial podcast on the planet. Let's get to it. Welcome to Fun with Annuities. I'm your host, Stan, the Annuity Man, America's annuity agent, licensed in all 50 states. And I am so glad to welcome back my first guest ever on the Fun with Annuities podcast. When we decided to do guests, and my smart little PR team was like, who do we get? Who do we get? Who is the... I'm like, I know who to get. I know I want to be the first guest. He's a personal friend of mine. We were partners at Morgan Stanley a long time ago. And he now owns his own firm. It's called Schrum Private Wealth Management. And if you see on the screen, you'll see the website beside his name. It's schrumpw.com. I could go through all his accolades, but he's a heck of a rhythm guitar player. Welcome back, Owen Schrum.
Glad to be here. Good to see you again, Stan.
Man, I am dying to hear your take on the chaos and the markets, etc. So, I mean, let's just jump into a main topic that everybody talks to me about. And, if they're really rich, I tell them to stop bitching. And that topic is inflation.
Well, I was thinking about this coming on, and I like to answer that in a bigger picture. And the concerns that we're seeing is inflation, number one, interest rates. Now the new thing is banking crisis, and of course the debt limit is going to crash the country, right? Then you got the Federal Reserve, you got spending, you got the stock market, you got the bond market. And the angle I like to take, or the approach I like to take with you and your audience, is not one of those things are standalone items, particularly inflation, particularly interest rates. They all are related, directly related. And it's like some big puzzle, a Zynga board. You pull out one log and the whole thing may collapse.
But and I call you O because I can. And by the way, just on a side note, and this is a celebratory moment, I know he doesn't look like that because he looks vibrant like me, wide-eyed. And
not that good.
But he is a new grandfather.
That's right. Proud.
The lovely daughter Meredith, who Owen and I were talking the other day about our kids. We were there when they were babies, and he was there for my daughter Brenna coming out of the hospital. We were in the waiting room together. So when I see Meredith giving birth to the first Schrum grandchild, it is a wonderful moment, but also makes me realize that even though I am so vibrant, Owen, I am getting older. I know you're saying no way. But it's
no. You're ready to put the sneakers back on, Stan. I can tell.
Low cuts, of course. Owen, don't you think that inflation is just... the thing that bothers me about inflation is the talking heads on CNBC and Fox News Business and all that stuff. They talk about inflation as inflation is a one size. I think it's customizable. I mean, for me, I don't buy milk and take them to dance classes anymore, my kids. So I don't spend as much on gas and food and all that stuff. Don't you think we need to talk more about inflation from the standpoint of how it affects each single person?
Absolutely. And by the way, when you're listening to people talk about inflation, or you tune into your newsletter, or even you talk to the advisors out there, let me state something unfortunate. Only about 15% of the people in the business has ever seen inflation. We have not had inflation since 1980.
Owen Schrum has cowboy boots older than most advisors. It's a true story. I mean, literally, he's been in the business a long time. He's the guy that I give all credit to for understanding markets. All, not some, all. He taught me everything, and it was back in the day when we were both really skinny and vibrant. But here's a great story. When people call me, and they have multiple millions of dollars, and they'll say, Stan, what are we going to do about inflation? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You can afford the eggs, you can afford the gas, and you're going to be okay. Inflation's hitting the bottom end like it always does. The people that are really, the lower end of the economy and people that really aren't making a lot of money, They're getting killed. That 65% driving around with $400 in their checking account. I always tell people when you go out on the road, 6 out of the 10 cars have $400 in their checking account each. Just realize that and be careful driving. So getting back to inflation, I don't want to derail, but I think we need to frame it better, right?
Correct. Inflation is a tax on the lower and middle class.
Hallelujah.
And let me explain, this is really important to understand.
Hallelujah.
Both from your investment portfolios and your societal outlook. Believe it or not, if you have inflation, if you have assets, I'm so sorry, if you have assets, if you have investments, if you have real estate, inflation, you actually benefit from inflation because your assets go up with inflation over time. Assets do, particularly certain assets, keep up with inflation. Who gets hurt the most is the consumer class, the person working for a living without investments, who don't benefit from the appreciation of their assets. All they do is see their cost of living going up and their standard of living
They're
going
called
down.
month-to-monthers, Owen. They're
Yes.
month-to-monthers. And every single one of us at some point in their life, unless we were trust fund babies that went to the University of North Carolina and stayed in the apartment, not the dorm, you know what I'm talking about. Every one of us has been month-to-monthers at some point in time if we started from scratch, and most of us did. So
we were month-to-monthers when we met, Stan.
Month-to-monthers, baby. So the point is, we understand that, and I call it the scars. We have those scars, and everyone has those scars. But I think, unfortunately, Owen, people take those scars into where they are now, where they have money, but they're not acting like it, right?
Mm-hmm. Really good point. Really good point. First off, let's go back to what causes inflation. What started this? I don't know if when people talk to you, do they want to know? Do they just blame an omnipotent universe, or do they really understand what caused this inflation?
I try to explain it in a simple form because that's what I do, Owen, about the printing of money.
Well, in this case, it's rather unique. If you go back to one of the great godfather of economics, Milton Friedman, who did work and rather proved that inflation is caused by an increase in the money supply. Now, where does that money supply come from? It comes primarily from the Federal Reserve. And annually, forever, the Federal Reserve increases the amount of money in the system. Your term, the printing press.
Yep.
3.5%. Stan, what's the average for inflation going back for 50 years?
I don't know that answer. What is it?
3.5%.
Okay.
So what happened in 2020? COVID hits. We already had easy money going back to 2008 from the financial crisis. Tons of money in the system.
Yep.
Tons of money. We had a decade of almost zero interest rates,
yep.
historically low, artificially low. Then the COVID hits. The Federal Reserve comes out and adds 40% to the money supply.
That's not 14. You said what?
40. 40%. $9 trillion. And unlike 08, which went into the banks, the banks' reserves and the insurance companies, much of this went into the public's pockets in various forms: PPP loans, stimulus loans, infrastructure loans, forgiving student debt, the new spending bills.
There wasn't any fraud in that, was there? Have we ever caught it? There's no fraud at all in any of that,
stories
right?
Going back, the amount of fraud in the PPP program is stunning.
It's
Harvard
unbelievable.
University, the Ivy League universities received more PPP loans than your average.
But they deserved it, the one. The Ivy League really deserves to be pumped up. By the way, on a side note, hold that thought for a second, because I just thought of something very, very important. And this is a question for you, and you'll be honest with me, which is the reason I love you.
Yeah, sure.
Should I get a haircut like Janet Yellen, like a Dutch boy? Like, I love her haircut. It's so unique, as they say. Do you think I'd look good in that?
I've always preferred the Yul Brynner look for you.
There's a great story one time. Hold your thought, Owen. We had a morning meeting and we were with Morgan Stanley. And by the way, Owen is got the sniffles, but he's just he's emotional about the morning.
The show must go on.
Yeah, he's emotional. But we had a morning meeting, and I got this wild hair up my ass to shave my head. So the next morning, I walk into the morning meeting with a completely shaved head, like first day Marine boot camp and walked in and if I had Owen's face on that, I wish I had. It's just bizarre. I don't know why I did it. I'm Stan the Annuity Man. I mean, I've been this character for a long time. Owen's put up with me. Love, he's embraced the chaos with my personality. So, okay, so it's a no on the yelling haircut.
No.
Dang it. She looks good in it. You have to admit. Dutch boy. I mean, you haven't seen that in a long time. On the paint can. So getting back to inflation, keep going.
So inflation is created. It's predictable. Predictable. We sat there in March and April of 2020 and told people we're going to have inflation. We're going to have. You can't add 40% to the money supply without that causing inflation. Well, the Federal Reserve then, as the economy picked back up again and people started getting on planes and restaurants slowly opened and people went back to work and got on the subways, they cut rates again instead of raising them slowly to stop inflation. They piled on. Then more stimulus checks, another $2 trillion in stimulus checks piled onto that. Just too much money chasing too few goods is the recipe, the cause of inflation. It was predictable. And the Federal Reserve's take was, as we all shook our heads, well, it's transient. Once the supply chain opens up, it's not transient. Everyone knows it's money supply related, but they didn't do anything about it. So now we have literally 8, 9, 10. We printed over 10.5% as inflation rate in 2023. Eggs tripled. Cost of goods to the person you talked about who gets up and goes to the grocery store was increasing greater than 11% because a lot of those consumer goods, cereal, eggs, things in the grocery store were going up 10, 11, 12, 20% quarter to quarter. And it really has reduced.
So where are you projecting? No one can see the future because we both lost and broke our crystal balls, but what do you think on inflation so we can move on to another topic?
Okay, it's going down. They raised interest rates, Stan, this is important, faster than at any point in history.
I know.
500% in around 14 months. It takes 12 months for that to ripple through the economy. Even housing is slower, which, by the way, the inflation figures they're getting from the government that they're using are 9 months old. So they're saying inflation's coming down to 4.9% last quarter. It's already down to 2% if you take housing out. That'll report later. I think we're going to end up at 3% inflation.
It's a moment. I would tell people it's a moment in time. Before we go on to another topic, I want to remind everyone who I'm speaking with, and it's very important. His name is Owen Schrum. He owns a private wealth management company called Schrum Private Wealth Management. It's based in Raleigh, North Carolina, God's country. He is fantastic if you're looking for someone that actually knows what they're doing and has ethics and morals and and manage your money on the non-annuity side. It's Owen, and we're going to have a page that you can go to his site, and his site is Schrum, SCHRUMPW.com. Just want to put that in. Owen, let's talk about interest rates. Everyone thinks they're a Svengali, and I always tell people if I knew where interest rates were going, I'd be on my Learjet trading interest rates, and you'd be beside me drinking a Budweiser. But I don't know. So tell me, give me your take on interest rates.
As I said, they've gone up faster than they should have. They've gone up 500%. They should have started cutting interest rates third quarter of last year. They didn't. They increased them more. There may be the probability we're getting from our people. Now, understand, these aren't guarantees. These are opinions. There's probably a 30.
They're very good opinions, though. They're very fact-based opinions.
Yeah. 25% or less that they'll raise interest rates one more time. For that to happen, the CPI data that's going to come in June has to be really hot. It's not going to be really hot. So we think most likely that it is done.
Yeah.
The bond market has priced in. And when I say priced in, if you look at interest rates of the Treasury, 10-year Treasury versus the 2-year Treasury versus the Treasury bills, the bond market is telling you that the market has priced in cuts in the third quarter of this year, meaning they're going to start lowering interest rates. I think this Federal Reserve, and they should, by the way.
Yeah,
this
sure.
Federal Reserve track record is a lot of everything is for show. And we don't believe they will because they're trying to make a point. One, they'd be admitting that they were wrong. And that doesn't seem to be their track record. Secondly, they don't have many monetary theory people on the Federal Reserve. They tend to be academicians or finance people or politicians. And so we don't think that they will. They'll hold them probably at this level through the remainder of this year, at least in the third quarter. And then going into 2024, we'll start seeing gradual cuts in interest rates. Now, Stan, let me make a point. The Federal Reserve only can affect short-term rates, the Fed funds rates. The market does the rest, believe it or not. The Federal Reserve actually could cut interest rates without cutting interest rates. Please, and to the public,
as they say in the South, explain, please.
This is really important. This is really a takeaway for your audience. If the remember, the Federal Reserve affects short-term rates. The reaction to those rates is what sets mortgage rates, is what sets the 10-year, the reaction of the market. If the Federal Reserve, namely Powell, comes out in his next meeting and says, we've looked at the numbers, inflation is cooling, now we're looking effects on the economy. If the numbers said so, we're going to stabilize and maybe looking at lowering rates to resist, to lower the chances of a hard recession, the market would take care of the rest. They wouldn't have to cut Fed funds rates for the interest rates to start coming down.
And this is what frustrates me. By the way, on a side note, Chairman Powell is known as Boog Powell to me. Boog Powell was a big first baseman, overweight, that played for the Orioles, but I digress. Baseball.
And owned an oyster bar in the Keys.
Yeah, so Boog Powell. Why? I understand. I'm hoping that they know exactly what you just said there, and if they do know, and I'm assuming they do, and why aren't they doing it, Owen?
Because he's afraid. I forget the gentleman's name. If I weren't on recording, I know it. But the Federal Reserve chairman through the 70s resisted.
Is it Volcker?
No, it was pre-Volcker. It was
pre-Volcker.
Okay. Volcker. And he was there for 8 years, and he resisted. He resisted raising rates, and as a result, was the architect, Arthur Burns.
Okay.
Arthur Burns was the architect of the great inflation of the late 70s, early 80s, where notoriously or infamously inflation went to 12%, interest rates went to 19% on CDs, and so he caused it. And Powell does not want his legacy to be that of Arthur Burns. So even they've already said they don't care about market reactions. They've already said most likely we're going to have a recession. He said that on the podium in front of the world. And my belief is he does not want to go down his history as the one who let entrenched runaway inflation take hold. He'd rather keep rates high at these levels, cause a recession. He's already said he's looking for and wants 5% unemployment. So he's willing to do that to, in his eyes, not allow runaway inflation to become permanent.
We're both country boys from North Carolina. We both grew up there, and we both grew up without and made it to where we are now by working hard. I mean, none of that makes sense to me. To stand up and say, I want 5% unemployment, I just like, what? What are you talking about? I don't get it. On a side note, Owen and I's passion's music, and he actually right now underneath that shirt has a Mott the Hoople t-shirt on, and he also knows that T-Rex is not a dinosaur; it's a rock band. So for all you old heads out there that are rock and rollers, Owen and I, that's our passion. We really don't. I mean, that's what we like to do. We're both, play around a little bit with the guitar and mess around. But I thought I'd throw a Mott the Hoople reference in there, Owen, just to see if I could catch anyone.
I took off my Mott the Hoople t-shirt and changed it in for my Uriah Heep t-shirt today.
I saw Uriah Heep recently. I really did. I saw Uriah Heep in Austin, Texas, and I was like,
"Are you serious?"
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they opened for Judas Priest, no blasphemy intended, just a rock band. But yeah, it was pretty interesting. On let's pivot, Owen. That's a good
Okay.
trend. That's a transition if there ever was one.
All right, that's good.
Banking crisis. Now let me say something right now. The regional banks, and I've been looking into this, and I am appalled, stunned, and shocked at the lack of assets. My comment, and I want everyone to listen closely. The Annuity Man LLC, which I own, has more assets under management than most regional banks. Now, yes, we are the gorilla in the room in the annuity business, high five, but that's nuts. I didn't know they were that small. And I guess when I'm looking into it, Canada, not that I care, they have no regional banks. It's just kind of major banks. Do you think we're trending in that direction?
I believe our government wants that. There's a great fear amongst many, and not just the radical on either side, that's calling for quote unquote a national bank. Now, people say a Federal Reserve is a national bank. Do you know the Federal Reserve is a private institution?
Yeah, I love the conspiracy books on the Federal Reserve. They're on
But
Pawleys Island, South Carolina, drinking a nice tea. That kind of stuff.
The nationalization of the banking system, you could argue that happened in 2008, but it is essentially the control. Europe, quote unquote, has nationalized banks. If you go to Europe, each country has two or three, and they're largely monitored.
And of course, Owen, we want to be just like Europe. Somehow
right.
our elites we really want to be like Europe, because Europe. No, we don't want to be like Europe. Hello.
Country of museum workers. I love Europe, by the way.
If you missed that, Owen said countries of museum workers. That's fantastic. All right. That's fantastic. Okay, so banking crisis. This is real, and there's a lot of shotgun weddings going on.
This is very real, and this has, if you're a small business, and I hate the term, by the way, small business.
We're small businesses.
There is no such thing as a small business. But
explain that.
A person with 3 people is an important, critical business. It's not small to them. It's not small to the customers. It's not small on the effects of the economy. 50% of the GDP of the United States is made up of those people. They just don't have organized lobbyists. But small businesses but economically, there's a term for small businesses, non-publicly traded businesses, less than 500 employees, etc. Small business make up 50% of the GDP, and this is going to affect them greatly. Remember, I started off saying it's all related, correct?
Yeah, it's all tied together.
Let's see what caused this problem. Banks, believe it or not, bring in deposits, make out loans greater than those deposits, or leverage. They leverage the bank. They then are required to keep reserves. They invest those reserves.
Sure.
Okay? So the banks then, remember, we're in this 0% interest rate since 2009.
Right.
When I say 0%, a 30-year treasury was 1.9%. So that's close to 0% interest rates. What do the banks do with these required reserves? They're mandated to require them. They buy treasuries.
Mm-hmm.
So the bank management comes in and says, well, instead of getting 0.1% on a T-bill, let's go buy a 10-year. It's a treasury, right? It's safe. Let's buy a 10-year treasury and get 2%. So they did. They bought 1 year, 2 year, 10-year. They bought treasuries. They extended the maturity. Rates go up 500%. Stan, listeners may or may not know there's an inverse relationship. Picture a seesaw if this goes.
Owen's got his arms up, which is scary.
Interest rates go up. The value of those bonds go down.
Yep. It's that simple. It's just that simple. Let's
not make it complicated. Interest rates go up. The value of those bonds go down. As a rule of thumb, they go down. There's something called duration, 1%. For 10-year, 1% will go down 8%.
And what Owen's talking about is the underlying value of the bond, what you can sell it for.
Correct.
Is down. That's what he's talking about.
Underlying value of the bond. You sell it prior to maturity. You hold it to maturity, you get your money back. You sell it prior to maturity, it's subject to market prices. Those market prices go down sometimes substantially when interest rates go up, particularly when they go up 500%. The Fed is over aggressive. They raise interest rates 500%. There's nothing these banks can do. Their bonds are sometimes worth 60, 70% on the dollar in their reserves. So then people, because interest rates have gone up, the banks have been paying for 0.1%.
Right.
Depositors say, I'm going to go find bigger money.
Right.
And they find some of these money markets pay 3%.
There's, and the rumor is some fixed rate annuities really pay high as well. I'm just going to tell you.
They go
But here's the
they,
other thing too, and I'm going to interject this. This is the annuity interjection right here. Annuity companies and banks buy the same bonds. Okay. The difference is annuity companies aren't forced to sell them.
That is correct.
And that's the reason there's no run on annuity companies and there's no correlation. Not that annuity companies are smarter than banks, as I always say, they're just more regulated. Well, and they put things in place that you can't run on it.
They have liability matching. They make
there you go, bingo. Whereas banks,
they got $10 million of death benefits actuarially in 2022. They have $10 million of treasuries.
It's like Owen walking into a bar and forgetting to put on pants. Remember those days?
No, I don't remember those days.
Exactly.
So these banks, Silicon Valley was a very unique bank, by the way. That's not your grandmother's bank.
No.
It was a bank of venture capitalists and small businesses, and by very, very wealthy venture capitalists.
Very wealthy, very connected,
who are at Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley was one of the few banks that would lend to the tech industry in Silicon Valley. So that money's easy. It's not sticky. It can go out the door real quick. They can tap the computer and move it to SoFi. Name your to Annuity. They can move it anywhere. So rates go up. They start pulling out large amounts of money,
like 500 million and 2 billion, like lots.
Billions.
Yeah, billions. That'll leave a mark. That hurts. Billions. As Chris Farley said, it doesn't hurt here or here. It hurts right here. Yeah, so that's gonna hurt.
Then has to sell these bonds in reserve, but because the Fed has raised interest rates, those bonds are below value. They have to pay out $2 billion. They sell bonds and only have $1.6 billion. They are now technically in default. There's the banking story.
My arbitrage brain, Owen, that you taught me how to develop, intercranium, says that if you had a lot of money, like institutional money, you're going to buy up those bonds, hold them to term, and make a killing. Am I missing something?
No, because even at the discount, those bonds are not good if you want to. Those bonds are depressed value, aren't good if you got to cash them in and pay depositors. However,
no, I'm talking about Owen Stan hedge fund.
But they're discounted to the amount of the current interest rate.
Got it.
So right now, a 3-year treasury's 4.8. They were issued at 1.8. They're discounted 30%, but that discount only brings them up to the current market value. No institution is going to be satisfied with 4.8% return.
Hey, by the way, on a side note, now that we just brought it, the Owen Stan hedge fund, I am interested in doing that with you, but we're only going to buy music catalogs. Like we go in and buy Mott the Hoople catalogs, right? And T-Rex.
It's a big business in private equity right now. Really
that's where we're headed, brother. Me and you. I don't know what it would be called. And we'd buy obscure bands like Budgie and things like that.
But I actually have a
Budgie. I understand. I understand. Okay, get back to the banking crisis. My question to you is, when I saw this is when I saw it was getting chaotic. When UBS had to buy Credit Suisse, they didn't do that because they really liked each other. That's a shotgun wedding. Was the last one we saw here with one of the big banks here buying the regional, was that a shotgun wedding?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They tried everything, and they were Republic Bank. And
by the way, we got to stop, Owen. Owen and I are from the South. Shotgun weddings, if you don't know what that is it's a forced wedding with the father-in-law holding a shotgun to the head of the person marrying his daughter who's pregnant. That's a shotgun wedding. Okay, so that's what we're talking about.
It was a shotgun wedding, and J.P. Morgan was given inducements and guarantees to take over the assets and guarantee the deposits of not the bond, not the equity, not the credit holders, but the deposits of deposit holders for Old Republic just to stop a bank.
Does that make your stomach hurt, Owen, other than other things?
What happened after 2008, I got calluses in my stomach.
That's fantastic.
The shotgun weddings in 2008 would.
Yeah, the Bank of America, the whole Merrill Lynch. That I would have loved to have been in that meeting where they had all the big hoo-haws in the one room, and the guys, with big egos are, I'm not going to do that because the number, and the guy's like, no, you're going to do that.
To your listeners, I'm going to tell you to watch something on YouTube for 15 minutes. It's better than Star Wars or Ted Lasso. And go to YouTube. I'm not kidding. Go to YouTube. Type into John Mack talks to Wharton class about Morgan Stanley default.
And John Mack was the CEO of Morgan Stanley when Owen and I was there, and he was such a fan of ours. I mean, literally loved us. But go ahead.
And he talks about on Sunday night, the president, the Federal Reserve, and the Treasury telling him that he is going to turn over the bank to JP Morgan for pennies on the dollar and lay off 200,000 employees. And he tells them expletive to the president of the United States and the Federal Reserve on the phone, hangs up on them, gets on the bank and starts working the banks of Japan in the middle of the night to get a bailout so he doesn't have to have a shotgun wedding.
Holy crap.
It's the most intense talk I've ever seen. That's why I say it's better than Star Wars or Ted
Say
Lasso.
the title again to type in.
It's just a Google search. John Mack talks to Wharton, Wharton, which is why I watched it. John Mack talks to Wharton about Morgan Stanley takeover financial crisis. You'll thank me.
By the way, Warren has graced the presence of Wharton, and they were lucky to have him. So going forward, regional banks, the crisis isn't over. Explain what's getting ready to happen from here.
I'm going to jump forward. I think we're going to see more stress on regional banks. We're going to see several more shotgun weddings, but my opinion is it's the crisis in this case is somewhat of a media discussion. There's not, because like I said, a crisis was 2008. This isn't going to be a crisis. However, the problem is coming and it's going to affect your listeners. And here is why. The regional banks now have been told by the Federal Reserve, by the FDIC, that you better really look at your balance sheets because all of them have poor duration matches. You better clean up your balance sheets. You better pull back on your reserves, increase your reserves, and we're going to regulate you more in 60 days. And you better be ready or you, Mr. Bank President, are going to lose the equity of your bank and it's going to be taken over. So what does, and by the way, these are some large regionals. I'm not going to mention names, large regionals. Mm-hmm. And so you know what they're doing? They're pulling in their loans. They're calling in their lines of credit. They're shoring up, whereas before they may have given the mason or the cement company a credit line at 3% for his receivables. They're charging him 9%. SBA loans for regional banks have soared to 11% today.
Oh, God.
So if they will give you a loan, they're going to triple what they're charging you. But most likely, if you need the money, they're not going to give it to you. And so now, and this is a fact, what's happening this is why it's going to affect, remember we talked about interest rates. Remember we talked about this all being interrelated. We're talking about inflation because the banks, 50% of the economy or more, small businesses, they no longer can get credit from the city core of the big banks don't deal with small businesses. Regional banks do. Community banks do. Yeah. They now have their credit is going to dry up, and when there's loans come in summer, you're going to see a contraction of credit. That's going to cause an economic slowdown, economic downturn. This is going to be equivalent of raising interest rates 2 times in terms of effects on the economy. This is not my opinion. This is straight from really smart people. You can look it up yourself. 2 more rate cuts could be the effect of the contraction of the banks. Now, let's take a step further in 2024 and 2025. There's tons of commercial real estate loans that are due. Now, a lot of, as we know, occupancy rate in New York's now up to 13%. 35% in San Francisco, 25% in Chicago. So you got a lot of empty offices, you got a lot of cash flow issues. Now those commercial loans roll over every 4 or 5 years. They're rolling over in 2024, 25. The big banks are saying, wait a minute, I'm not going to lend you that money at that rate you got to bring some more cash. We could have some commercial loan defaults out of this because of tightening credit. This is where it's related and unintended consequences. The regional bank issues, the contraction of the credit that is that is a cause of that. The increased regulation that's going to contract lending is going to affect businesses and real estate for the next 24 to 36 months, having an added effect on slowing down the economy. We talk about it, we're going to have a recession. Is it going to be a soft recession? It's going to be a hard recession. You got to factor in the effects of this credit contraction in those discussions.
So takeaway for the people is just hold on, it ain't over, right?
The economy probably, I'd like to say we're going to have a soft landing. We got to see what the effects of this banking contraction is going to be. This puts pressure on the camp that says we're going to have a recession.
Yeah. Before we pivot to the next topic, my question to the listeners and viewers, because we're on all major podcast platforms and the Fun with Annuities YouTube channel, if you want to see the dynamic nature of what we look like. But my question to the viewers and the listeners is, does your current advisor sound like this? Do they talk like this? Do they have insights like this? Do they have facts like this? Do they have experience like this? And I'm going to say 99% of your advisors do not, which means you might want to check Owen out. And this isn't a shameless plug. I'm trying to, in these times, you need someone really smart. So, check Owen out, SCHRUMPW.com. Shameless plug. He's a personal friend of mine. And I just think what he does is unique and it's needed. And people need to know about it, which is, I'm just so happy to have him on. Oh, and let's talk about the debt limit and I don't want to talk politics because both sides make me want to vomit, but give us the real take on what's going on. Screw the media. It's ridiculous. Give us the debt limit stuff.
If I was a good actor, I'd feign falling asleep on the screen and snore. Much ado about nothing. This has happened 19 times.
Why is it just because for ads and clicks? Is that?
Yes.
I mean,
yes,
every time this happens, I'm like, Schumer, sit down. McCarthy, sit down. Whoever's in the off presidential chair, sit down if you can. It drives me crazy. So we're just running on a treadmill again, is what you're telling me?
So it's happened 19 times. It almost always happens whenever you've got divided government, meaning the president and houses are not. I'm sure we've got audience members who've invested for a long time. 10 years ago, the market, since 10 years, it's more than doubled. I think that's a fair statement. Your investments have doubled. 10 years ago, we had the worst debt crisis of all time with President Obama and Senator Representative Boehner. So much so, if you remember,
wait a minute, Boehner, like the one that cries every time when he says hello.
That's the one.
Okay, go ahead.
If you remember, audience, they shut down the national parks. They shut down the
No Yogi Bear.
No Yogi. They shut down the national park. You couldn't go in the plaza. They shut down tours. It was all. They shut down the libraries. It was all. Say there were. Since then, they settled it in the last hour. They did an extension. They settled it. They've done it twice since then. They're going to do it this time. There's lots of things we can discuss, lots of things we've already discussed that you need to think about for maintaining your standard of
this
living.
Ain't one.
This ain't one of them.
This ain't one of them, as they say in the South.
It ain't one of them.
Well, let's talk about debt in general, not the political crap that's going on now. As I understand it, and there is many ways to count debt, but aren't we at 31 trillion and counting? And what does that mean?
It means that for the largest period in history, a percentage of the GDP. I don't have the percentage, but we've now reached debt as a percentage of the GDP by far. It's doubled since in the past 8 years, and it's a problem. I saw an interesting stat, and I think this is correct. The increase in the debt load, Stan, to your audience, I told you they've increased. Remember, we borrowed those $31 trillion, have to pay interest. You have to pay interest on those to bondholders. The increase in the past 12 months in the debt, and just the interest on the debt, not the interest on the debt, just the increase in the interest on the debt is larger than the defense budget.
Which means that Boog Powell, it's like I always tell people, this is very simple. If you had a mortgage, let's just say you did, and you just said, you know what, I'm going to raise the interest rate on the mortgage. That would not be smart. Eventually, you'd want to lower it back down. Isn't it that basic of a correlation?
Yeah, sure. It's a little more complex when you're looking at a national economy, and I don't want to get into the politics of this. You just get a little bit of Keynesian versus supply, but
I just fell asleep. I'm sorry, I just nodded off. What did you just say?
As a whole, our economy is built upon the fact that the private sector invests and builds. They take capital, they multiply that capital by hiring people, creating products. You hire people, create products. Apple makes a phone, 100 companies make parts in that phone, right? It's a multiplier effect. Hires people, creates taxes, grows the wealth, grows the GDP. When the government takes that wealth for debt, it doesn't do that. It doesn't have a multiplier effect. It doesn't build business. So the more resources any government, let's not pick on ours, the more resources any government takes away from the private sector, the slower that economy is going to grow, right? Now, particularly when that's just interest on the debt, and that's dead money, that's just wasted. It has no multiplier effect.
Right.
So the more resources, the slower the economic growth is going to be. Instead of growing at 2 to 3%, which, by the way, when you grow 2 to 3%, you grow faster than your debt, and that way, your debt is less important because your economy is growing faster than your debt. But when you slow growth, suddenly that government spending becomes even important. It's a giant anchor on the economy. You used your household. You worked hard, but both you and your wife, or you're retired and you've got your income lined out. Everything's great. You can go on vacation. You can pay your mortgages, and all of a sudden, they increase the insurance on your house by $100,000. So you've got to go cut. You got to stop spending somewhere, right?
Right.
You got to pay it. That's what businesses have to do. When the government's taking that money out of the economy, they have to stop spending on growth.
What are some of the positive trends you're seeing in the economy? Because one of the things I love about this country, not to start singing the "I'm proud to be an American" song, is that when we go through crises, COVID, etc., we have a country, and I'm a little biased here, that reacts, changes, and gets better. That's what I love about us is as a country is. We just don't say, well, that hurt. Well, I guess it'll happen again. No, we try to prevent it. So what are some of the positive things you're seeing in the country right now, or in the global environment?
Inflation is getting back under control. Number one. Number two, despite inflation being 10%, companies' earnings, small and large businesses, are actually holding up better than people thought because they're smart. They've increased prices. They've gotten lean. The management of business in this country has done a remarkably good job through COVID, keeping the economy. Who would have ever guessed in 2020 that you couldn't get on an airplane because every seat was full?
No doubt, man. No doubt. I fly all the time, and it's packed.
Yeah, this country is so resilient. Churchill.
Can I say a side note though? I think the seats need to be larger in coach. That's just my opinion. Yeah, the physics is not working when I see that. Of course, I'm flying first class. But as I see them walking past me as I'm drinking my coffee, I'm thinking that ain't gonna work, player.
To answer your question in one sentence, Winston Churchill had a great line in World War II. He says, and I'm paraphrasing, I hope I get it right, The United States will exhaust every opportunity to do the wrong thing. And in the end, when forced to, will always do the right thing.
That's a good way to put it. I mean, even though politics is crazy and, you know, the whole political correctness and wokeness and fringe right, whatever, fringe right, fringe left, both nuts. It seems like
I got to interject there, Stan. We all now know who Alexander Hamilton is, right?
we
Guy who
do. And by the way, Owen, I did go see the Broadway play and sat through the whole thing.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Now that we know how important an American he was, remember, founding fathers, all those smart people, Aaron Burr shot him and killed him. The vice president of the United States shot him and killed him in his duel. Politics have always been ugly in this country.
And it always will. I always say, Owen, and I think I'm not sure you can fit into this because you're so dashing, but I always say it's an ugly world and I fit in perfectly. You can quote me on that. Tell me what your boy Jeremy Siegel's saying about all this chaos. Because first of all, tell people who Jeremy Siegel is, and if it's not on their radar screen,
follow him.
Needs to be.
Dr. Siegel is noted professor, Wharton Business School, professor of mine. Most famous, he was asked back in the 80s to write a definitive book on the stock market, stocks for the long term. And it's not your normal book. He researched and had all the Wharton people research stocks going back to before they kept records to prove all the trends and historical references to the stock. It's the definitive work on the stock market. And mine and your day, he was famous in 1999. Remember, Stan? He said, this is a bubble. The NASDAQ can't go up. It's a financial bubble. It will crash. Everyone laughed at him. He did. His track record, he doesn't pick stocks. He picks economic trends. And he has been remarkable in his accuracy. He got on a call with us March 30th, April 1st, 2020, said inflation is coming. However, the stock market will recover. Guess what? Inflation came, stock market ended up positive for 2020. Very smart man. He has been, and you can go on CBC records or just Google him. He has been a outspoken critic, unbelievably so. I mean,
yeah, what did he say about the Fed recently? You were telling me that. What did he say?
He said Chairman Powell owes the American public an apology.
That'd be nice.
But for him to say that, the most noted,
that's a lot. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
He's accurately. He said the Federal Reserve should have raised interest rates in 2023 a little bit, and instead of lowering them, and it would have all worked through the system. They didn't. He said they should have stopped raising interest rates third quarter of 2023 last year. They didn't. He said they've overshot on interest rates. They're using stale data. They're using real estate data showing things that rents are still going up because they're using data from 9 months ago, and that he's been remarkably poorly executed Federal Reserve policy. Most importantly, he says they should stop raising interest rates immediately, should change their tone. Remember what I said about the biggest thing in the Federal Reserve is just stop talking and just say, okay, we're going to use the numbers. Inflation's waning. We got it under control. We'll wait and see. If he did that, we'd be fine. 6 months later, they'd start cutting rates. Probably, he says, inflation will end up averaging 2.3% next year, and interest rates will be 3.5%.
I think if people just follow two people for market stuff, Jeremy Siegel and Owen Schrum, who I now deem as the Dean Smith of private wealth management. No offense to NC State fans out there.
Can't say that.
I can say it. He's the Dean Smith. He's the gold standard of private wealth management for individuals. But if you follow just Owen and Jeremy Siegel, you'll be fine. One last topic, Owen, and I know you're just leaning into this. You just love it. Because now let me give the audience some background. We first did the first Fun with Annuities podcast with guests when my PR team said, it'd really be good, Stan, if you had guests on and then they could share their knowledge. And I'm like, okay. And so Owen came on, and at that point in time, Bitcoin was 66,000. and we blasted it. And we got so much hate mail, it was overwhelming. Now, of course, we were right, and Owen was right. Give me your take currently on the bounce here, because I still don't understand it. There's still no underlying value. Yes, Bitcoiners, come at me, baby. What's your take, O?
It goes back to the initial comments about the degree of liquidity. There's so much money out there chasing assets. And whether or not, and I do not believe, I still maintain there's no stored value outside of the technology. Okay?
Yeah, the blockchain is legitimate, but we're talking about the 7,000 cryptocurrencies.
There has been a much needed shakeout with possibly more to come. However, there's still a lot of money in that area.
Mm-hmm.
It went on the sidelines when it went down to what, 14,000
Mm-hmm.
last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's going back in. There's still devotees. There's still, I mean, Stan, I read that the average person under 30, and there's some people with wealth under 30, particularly
sure,
in the,
of course,
and that they buy more. They just are believers. They've been raised with it and they believe it. Whether I do or not, they do. And some of their wealth is going back there. So it's just assets going into a technology and it's increasing its value. I mean, there's money going into it is your answer. Why?
A lot of young people believe in crypto more than they believe in the S&P 500.
They do. They do.
And that's absolute nuts to me. But I'm, Owen, as you know, I'm old. And so, I'm dating myself.
Speaking of old, if you want another take on crypto, dial up and read what Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett says about it.
Buffett said he wouldn't give $25 for all of it.
He did.
I love that. And Munger said something even worse. But, if I'm 98, Owen, can you picture me at 98, how brutal I'll be? Oh, my gosh. It'll be horrific.
I look forward to it.
Listen, man, you and I
we'll
both
still be listening to Mott the Hoople, I promise you.
Mott the frickin' Hoople. What's another one I'm missing there that's from that age that I really need to re-listen to?
Mark Bolan and T-Rex, Mott the Hoople, David Bowie, Mick Ronson.
Yeah, there's a great David Bowie documentary on HBO right now that just very visionary. And, when I retire, that's my look going in. It's probably David Bowie. Either that or Janet Yellen or a combination of the two.
Look up Janet Harvey.
What now?
Alex Harvey and the sensational Alex Harvey band.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Owen, we're up against it. Man, you know that me and you, we could chat like this forever.
I enjoy it.
I enjoy your
audience. I do enjoy it.
But here's, and again, Owen Schrum, it's SCHRUM www.SCHRUMPW.com. PW stands for private wealth. Check him out. If you don't after listening to this, I don't know when you hit your head and how many paint chips you've eaten, but he's the real deal. He's the real deal. If you haven't figured it out, unfortunately, I got in the way with some. My brain goes down the rabbit hole sometimes, and Owen has figured that out because we used to work together, and he's like grabbing me.
There's good information out there, though. I think you did a good service to your audience.
Bringing you on, you're right. One last thing, and as you know, with all of my guests, is the mic drop moment, of which I count you down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you're going to say something that is going to be evergreen content that people will always refer to even after your Learjet hits the mountain. And they're going to say, remember when Owen did that mic drop moment on Stan's podcast? So no pressure whatsoever, Owen, but I'm going to count you down. So get prepared. Here's the mic drop moment, and then I'll close us out after that. Here we go. Mic drop moment. Owen Schrum. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
We are going to be facing a lot of uncertainty going forward in the next 18 months. Shrink your sources of information to proven people. Stay with solid, diversified assets that have proven over time to be outperformers in inflationary high-tax markets.
Can we say hallelujah to that from the South? Very, very good. Listen, I want to thank everybody that joined us on all major podcast platforms. The YouTube channel, Fun with Annuities. Obviously, I appreciate you tuning us in. Check Owen out. I appreciate Owen you being on, and I will see everybody. Yeah, we'll see you next time on what's it called? It's called Fun with Annuities.